How is it going, guys? Welcome back, or should I say, welcome to the very first episode of the brand new podcast. For those of you who know, this was formerly known as Not Just Another Basketball Show. Took maybe a longer break than what was anticipated or what I would have hoped for, but we're back now with a brand new podcast, The Dunk and One. Now, this is going to be basically what we had before. Now, I'm hoping for a lot more fresh ideas, let's say a lot more dedication and commitment to this than what I done last time. Now, saying that, I don't want to go back to the very start and give you my whole life story of this podcast like I kind of did nearly nearly every single episode of the last one. There's always such a big break in between episodes. But essentially, what I'm hoping for with this is just to kind of give a first perspective on the NBA. You know, of course, it's an American sport. Of course it's a global sport in the sense that the league has so much talent from around the globe at the moment, and there's fans all around the world tuning in to see the biggest players and the biggest games. But most of the media we consume around the sport is based in America, and rightly so. Like I said, the sport is based in America. But in my time of watching the sport and becoming a huge fan of the sport, I wanted to kind of, I suppose, give maybe somewhat of a different perspective. Not that it's going to be so different just because I'm based in Ireland, but I don't know. This is exciting for me. It's not a very popular sport here in Ireland, so I'm hoping to at least open up some other interests in people for the Irish listeners here, but also for the Americans here, and like I said, just a different approach, a different perspective, maybe just a different outlook on things. So what we're going for with this podcast is, of course, like any other basketball podcast, we're of course going to talk about any recent games that happen. Of course, now we're coming to the tail end of the regular season, coming up to the play-ins and the playoffs and all that good stuff. But I suppose as a quick overview of what to expect in the next 2 to 3 weeks with this podcast, today is essentially just going to be an intro, almost like a welcome back to the show. And I'll recap last night's games, go over maybe some little changes that might have happened in MVP races if it so happened, and like I said, have a look at the playing games or the potential playing games as it stands at the moment. Now, the episodes are going to be coming thick and fast in the next 2 weeks. An awful lot of the stuff I've prepared is, I suppose, a little bit time sensitive. So tomorrow or Wednesday, I'm hoping to release the start of my recap. So basically, what this would be is split into 2 episodes, East and West, and I'll go through every team's current situation, what their season has been up until this point, positives, negatives, where they go from here, how they start looking towards next season, and so on and so forth. And of course, like I says, the East episode will be tomorrow, and I'll probably be looking at the West episode coming out on Friday. Now, of course, we'll throw in little recaps in there as needed. Then, of course, the regular season ends on Sunday, which leaves us a 2-day gap between when the regular season ends and the play-ins begin. So next Monday, May 17th, I'm going to do my personal award selections. Not necessarily predictions, because some of these could go in a different direction, but these are more so who my picks would be for the award, for the major awards, if I had a vote, I suppose. I think that'll be a good timing for that as well. Obviously, all of these awards are regular season awards, and that's something that we all need to remember as fans. So I think the day after the season ends will be a good time to go through these. And then, of course, like I said, the play-ins will begin on May 18th, Tuesday. So again, ticking fast. Another episode will be out on Tuesday to give my overview of the playing games, what my predictions are going to be, what we need to look out for, and some of the major headlines around what these playing games are going to bring. And then once the playing games end and just before the playoffs begin, I'm going to do my playoff bracket predictions. So of course, we'll be having a look at from the 1st seed down to the 8th seed, have it taken into account them playing winners, and kind of almost like a March Madness style bracket, going through it game by game, series by series to see who I think is going to win it all when push comes to shove. It's also worth mentioning that this podcast is available on basically all platforms, all major platforms where you can listen to your podcasts. This is hosted through Anchor, of course, owned by Spotify. So you'll find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, anywhere you need to listen to this, you can find it. If you listen to it somewhere else and you can't find this podcast, let me know. I'll sort out distribution to that platform. And what the previous viewers of this podcast would know, that I'd mentioned that I wanted to do video podcasting towards the back end of when I finished up with Not Just Another Basketball Show. That will be coming soon. Of course, I wanted to start it from episode 1. I'm just waiting on a bit more equipment to come. I have the camera, I have the light, and have the tripod stuff, everything like that. But I'm just waiting on the green screen, just to kind of give a neutral background, I suppose. I could host it through Zoom, of course, but just for a little bit of professionalism, and I suppose to make it look that little bit nicer, we're going to wait for the green screen. So hopefully not too long to wait for that. But of course, just to get into the habit of uploading it to YouTube, having it there available, this will be available on my own channel, Carl of Clubs, but it'll just be a static image of the logo, basketball, everything that goes with that. Now that we know that what's coming with the podcast, and now that all of the formalities are out of the way, let me formally welcome you to the very first episode of the Dunk and One podcast. Now, looking at last night's games, there was 8 NBA games in total. Now, I didn't get to watch all of them. I caught a little bit of the Miami-Boston game, the New Orleans-Charlotte game, and I caught the highlights of the Phoenix and Lakers games as soon as I woke up. So I won't pretend like I know everything that happened in the other games, but we will go through them, of course. So, starting with Miami-Boston. Miami were quick out of the gates. Jimmy Butler had himself a night last night. And we know what Jimmy Butler's about at this stage. He's going to bring it every night. He's the leader of that Miami team. And as you'll find out, let's say, I suppose we'll even talk about it in a little while, there was an argument to be made at one stage, if we're talking purely MVP, who's most valuable to their franchise, you have to include Jimmy Butler in that list. He's had it going for them. He had a stretch where he was missing for a while, and Miami just couldn't get it together. They have a good roster there with Bam Adebayo and Duncan Robinson, Victor Oladipo since the trade, just a little bit before the trade deadline. So we know that Miami's going to have plenty of depth there, but I don't know what it was with this season. And I suppose like I'd already mentioned, we know that Jimmy Butler is kind of the heart and soul of that team. And, we seen that last year in their run to the finals. But this year, it just felt different. Them games that they were out, it felt like they had a lack of an identity. We know that they're going to be good, solid on the defense, between the likes of Duncan Robinson and Goran Dragic. Anyone, most people on that team can shoot the three, but don't know, when Jimmy Butler wasn't there, they just didn't seem to get it going. So speaking purely from a who's most valuable to the franchise, again, it's, Jimmy Butler could argue that case, but he showcased that again last night. He put up a tremendous night on all fronts, and Miami were leading big at the break, but it was kind of a combination of them maybe a little bit complacent coming into the second half, and Boston wanting to rally the troops in the second as well. But Boston kind of came back in the second half. They outscored the Heat by 5 points in the third quarter and 15 in the fourth. They only held Miami to 25, while putting up 40 themselves. And Evan Fournier had himself a great game off the bench. So you need to give Boston their props where needed, but at the same time, if they maybe came out a little bit quicker in the first and second quarter, they potentially could have taken this game from Miami. Then moving on to the New Orleans-Charlotte game, it was a close one, of course. The Pelicans beating out the Hornets just by 2 points, 112 to 110. And again, a kind of a game of two halves as well. I suppose a game nearly every quarter, I suppose, was one-sided other than the third. the Pelicans beating Charlotte by 9 in the first, then getting outscored by nearly 20 in the second. So, of course, this is now the Pelicans without Zion Williamson after he fractured his ring finger on his left hand, and that's probably seen him out indefinitely, which is a shame because I suppose if I don't think I'm speaking purely for myself, but maybe it's only San Antonio Spurs fans that's going to disagree with me on this. But I think the casual NBA fan and I suppose the fans following the stars, you need to look at it, the Pelicans, and say it would have been a lot nicer to see maybe New Orleans in a playing game against the Lakers or potentially the Golden State Warriors over the San Antonio Spurs, which at times can be porridge with the way they play and with the lack of a true star. Like no one is lining up to watch DeMar DeRozan play basketball. But maybe that's just me. I like DeMar DeRozan personally, but as a player, he's not star talent that everyone is queuing up to see play basketball. And of course, it was another meeting between the Ball brothers this season, in LaMelo's rookie year, and both of them put up a good game as well. It's unusual to see a Charlotte game that LaMelo plays in that he's not the star of the show. But Terry Rozier had himself a game last night as well, putting up a 40 piece on the Pelicans, but unfortunately just couldn't get them over the line in the end. And I have to say props to Charlotte. For me, these have been one of the stories of the season. I know an awful lot of, let's say, the emphasis is on LaMelo as, let's say, the star of the show, and then even kind of going outside of Charlotte, the story of New York having the first winning season in a few years and stuff like that. But I don't know. I'm so happy to see the Hornets actually playing exciting basketball. I know we had them years where Kemba Walker was there and they were making the 8th seed every now and again, but these are far better than them Charlotte Hornets teams back then. From props to James Borrego, because I really didn't think he was the coach to bring them forward. But I mean, like, if you look at this roster, like, you have Terry Rozier, LaMelo are leading them. Then they have Miles Bridges having a breakout year this year, PJ Washington looking good in the sophomore year, and even to like Cody Martin is playing quite well. And I wouldn't have had Cody Martin on my radar coming into this season. And that's even without even talking about the likes of Gordon Hayward, who of course signed on the max deal during the summer. But they'll be fun to see in the playoffs this season. That's given that they make the playoffs, of course. Looking at the standings at the moment, they could potentially be in a playing game. They're sitting there 2 games behind Boston and 1 game ahead of the Washington Wizards. So that's again another exciting thing to keep an eye on now going into next week's playing games. And I suppose just before we move on to Phoenix and the Lakers, just I suppose across the league, we had a blowout win for Dallas against Cleveland, 124-97. Tim Hardaway actually putting up most points that night with 25. And I think at this stage we probably know that it's going to come down to someone like Portland or the Lakers making that play in the 7th seed play-in spot out west. So I think Dallas are safe at this stage. They're sitting a game ahead of Portland and 2 games ahead of the Lakers. So this is just another win in their belt now in their march to the playoffs. And I think Luka, given his age, given his experience in the league, like, this is his 3rd year and he's looking Hall of Fame potential at this stage. But for me, he has these few years to figure it out in the postseason, and I don't even necessarily believe that Kristaps Porzingis is his secondary star to lead him to success. So I don't really know what the postseason holds, but I'll touch on that in a in a later episode when I'm talking about the West teams. Then we have Chicago beating Detroit 108-96, and of course, mathematically, Chicago aren't out of the play-in race just yet. They're sitting on 29 wins, just 2 games behind Indiana in the 10th seed. Indiana, they've been putting up high-scoring games in the last 5-6 games, but they're not really getting the wins to go with that play. And I think Chicago, when they made that Vucevic trade, slipping on my words, we thought that was kind of going to excel them past where they already were. if you look at the Chicago Bulls standing at any stage this season, it hasn't been above 500, at least for a prolonged period of time. And I personally thought that when they signed Vucevic, him and Levine were going to get it going. And I know Levine got hit hard with the health and safety protocols and stuff, and that put him out for a stretch of nearly 7 games. And at the same time, it's not really excelling Chicago to win now. You know, Vucevic's going to be going into his last year of his deal next year. Or maybe is that? No, it's Zach LaVine in his last year of his deal next year, and Kobe White and stuff, like, still being on his rookie deal. So I still think they have time to get it together. Whether that's this year or not, who knows? But they still have this off season to make some right changes to build around Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic. But again, these aren't mathematically out of the playing spots just yet, so that's maybe a story to keep your eye on. Then we had a big win for the New York Knicks, beating out the Clippers, the full strength Clippers at that, 106-100. Julius Randle having himself a nice game. Again, you know, these are two teams that are guaranteed to make the playoffs at this stage. The Clippers probably won't be giving up the third seed. Out west, they're sitting a game ahead of the Denver Nuggets in the third seed, and still a little bit behind Phoenix in the second seed. New York, of course, still putting great games together, still gelling, running into their first postseason since 2013, I believe. Derrick Rose having himself a 25-point game off the bench, and he's, I suppose, maybe a little teaser to next week. He's my pick for sixth man of the year this year, and I think what he's done in New York, already contributing to a great team in New York, saying that, but what he's done both on the court and off the court with that team has been nothing short of extraordinary. So props to Derrick Rose, and I'm gonna be glad to see him in the postseason yet again. Then we look to Minnesota. They beat Orlando 128-96, a blowout. But at this stage of the season for Orlando, we wouldn't expect anything different. Of course, you know, they have their young core. They're still missing the likes of Markelle Fultz and John Isaac, who hopefully will be back next season. And you know, they have it under control. We don't really need to worry too much about where the Orlando Magic stand at the moment. They have a bright future ahead of my eyes. But again, another positive game, for another huge game, should I say, for Anthony Edwards. He had a 10 rebound game. I actually don't know whether that's a career high or not. 16 points, 5 assists, so an all around great game. That's as well as Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell, and I think that's in his first start since he came back from injuries and playing off the bench for the most part. So he put up a 27-point game, 6 rebounds, 8 assists, and Karl Anthony Towns putting up 27 points. You know, so this is again another team. I feel like I'm going to be saying that an awful lot when I'm talking about the recaps. I feel like when you look at all of these franchises, I feel like a lot of them have young cores, and it is a very young league at the moment compared to a stage as, you know, you have an old man's league and an awful lot of players in their prime, whereas an awful lot of these teams seem to have young cores, and you know, if they manage to keep them together, who knows? It's kind of hard to predict how the league is going to turn out in the next few years. But this is, again, I feel like if they can make things click between Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, and Karl Anthony Towns, maybe get another few pieces in there, like even having someone like Josh Okogie off the bench who's going to bring that defense that realistically it's only really Anthony Edwards that's bringing on a nightly basis other than Josh Okogie. Naz Reid, of course, is getting better year on year. This is the second year in the league. Even Jalen Noel is surprising me this year. He's looking a lot more positive this year than he has in previous years. So again, another team to keep your eye on. Then the last game, just before we move to the headline game of last night, was Sacramento and OKC. You know, this was a game that Kenny Beecham, KOT4Q, had to cover last week on TNT. His first live appearance on TNT. Props to him. But again, Sacramento beating out the OKC Thunder 126-98. It's these two teams, their season is over. OKC has been in tank mode. Again, similar to to Minnesota, like I was saying, they have a young core, and if you're talking about young cores with a bright future, it's the OKC Thunder. I think it's 27 picks in the next 8 years. Having rookies there like Pokashevsky, Teo Maladon. They obviously have Shea Gilgeous-Alexander there. A great young core. Lou Dort. Who could forget Lou Dort? This is a team that has a very bright future ahead. If they do good things in the draft and in the off season, of course. But I mean, this is the same GM that drafted 3 consecutive MVPs in 3 consecutive drafts. So I think Sam Presti has it under control. And then moving to the main event, of course, all eyes were on the Lakers and the Suns last night. The Lakers still fighting to get out of the play-ins. Now, whether they get out, it begs to be seen. Still sitting a game behind the Portland Trailblazers, who, of course, have the tiebreaker. But the Lakers won this 123-110, which was actually surprising to me and to most. I thought Phoenix had the number here, and especially with LeBron still out, Anthony Davis not back to himself. But then again, I suppose he made a liar of us last night. He put up 42 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 3 blocks. Like that's a plus 26 on the night. He really led the Lakers last night, and in a must-win game. Essentially, like they have where they stand in the Western Conference at the moment. There is still room to go up and to go down, so it was a must-win game against potentially a team they could meet in the playoffs. So a very big win for them. And I even, looking at how the Phoenix Suns played last night, they didn't really look like they had it all together. I think in one sense, maybe the Phoenix Suns are probably looking at the postseason already. These haven't been here in an awfully long time. They're going to be aware of, let's say, Chris Paul after giving it basically every game this year, and after coming off a pretty hectic year last year, they'll want to make sure that Chris Paul is healthy going into the postseason, and you could almost see that last night. And I won't dare say that Chris Paul was taking it easy last night. I don't think Chris Paul knows how to take it easy, but you could sense that there was one eye on the postseason, and they can at this stage, they can afford to give up a game here or there. Like at this point in time, they're maybe 3 games away from finishing out their season. They're guaranteed top 2 seed in the West, which is phenomenal for the Phoenix Suns, and again another great storyline from this year. As far as the Lakers go, they still have to figure it out, I suppose, with their big men rotations. They started Andre Drummond again last night, and Marc Gasol got 18 minutes off the bench. Same with Montrezl Harrell getting 14 and a half. But they need to organize the rotations a little bit better, because like looking at the box plus minus, like Montrezl Harrell was a -9 last night, and with the Lakers winning by 13 points, -9 it's an outlier, and especially when even Drummond was +3, Marc Gasol off the bench in his 18 minutes to +10. But it's still time. It's unfortunate for them in their situation that usually you'd expect the Lakers at this point in time just to be kind of getting them rotations right, and similar to the Phoenix Suns, just have one eye on the postseason. But at this point in time, they need to give it 100% game in, game out, and they're going to have to figure it out on the fly while getting the likes of Anthony Davis and LeBron James back to full fitness on the fly as well. So as mentioned, today's episode is going to be a short one. Of course, this is more as a welcome back, or should I say welcome to the new podcast, and an awful lot of the content that's going to come for this is going to come in the next few days, the next few weeks. So today is really just kind of looking back at last night's games, giving an overview of what's to come. But I suppose before we finish up, I just wanted to go through what the playoff picture is right now at the moment if the league was to finish today. So of course we have these play-in tournaments to look at, and both in the East and Western Conference, there's an awful lot to digest. Really, really big matchups to come from this. So, of course, out west first, we have we have the 7th and 8th seed, who at the moment is the LA Lakers and the Golden State Warriors, which, from a neutral point, I know some of the players aren't happy to see a playing game, but purely from a basketball fan's perspective, this is incredible to see LeBron James take on Steph Curry and a winner takes all. Like, and I know, fair enough, the loser will go into have another opportunity to make the playoffs, but like, this is incredible. That's, and fingers crossed we do see a masterclass from both, and of course, that's even without including like Anthony Davis in that. But fingers crossed it's not a blowout, that this is really a competitive game from start to finish, and we see the best of both now heading into the playoffs. And of course, in the 9th and 10th seed, it's Memphis and San Antonio Spurs. Like I mentioned, San Antonio is a little bit like a porridge, especially of late. So I probably would have rather see the New Orleans Pelicans in there. Of course, if seeing a Zion Williamson take on Ja Morant for a place in the playoffs, and a place in further in the play-ins, but that would have been great to see. And of course, the winner and loser of that will take on to finish out the 7th and 8th seed. So then, of course, we have Utah taking on the winner of the second game in the play-in, and Phoenix taking on the 7th seed. Then you have Denver and Dallas in a 4-5, which that wasn't a repeat of last year. No, I'm not mixing that up. I don't think so, anyways. No, because Denver took on Utah in the first round. That was actually Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell going at it in the first round, which was amazing. So fingers crossed we see more of that this year. Given that this is the final 4-5, Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., them all going at it. Then the 3-6 at the moment is the LA Clippers and the Portland Trailblazers, who, of course, the last few years, Portland they've been going up and down, haven't they? Like they'd of course won the play-in last year, and under different circumstances, and were the 8th seeds, and of course took on the Lakers. Then the year before that, they make the conference finals and play against the Warriors, and then this time in the 6th seed against the Clippers. And I suppose that's props to Damian Lillard and his consistency and his ability to carry the Portland Trailblazers to the playoffs year in, year out. He's a true leader there in Portland. And CJ McCollum, I think this year has been a career year for him. He's been spectacular, and other than his injury that just came before the All-Star break, I think he would have been an All-Star this season for the first time. So I'm expecting big things from them in the first round, but it won't be easy against the Clippers, of course. Kawhi and Paul George have been great all year. It's just whether Paul George can get over the postseason hump and become his self-proclaimed playoff P rather than the fan-proclaimed pandemic P, which he so famously earned last year, or infamously earned last year, for better words. Then looking out east, of course, in the play-ins, we have in the 7-8 Boston and Charlotte, and that's actually surprised me. I completely forgot that Boston was in the 7th seed at the moment, and that's a great matchup right there. You're gonna have Gordon Hayward revenge game against Boston. You have LaMelo potentially trying to earn his first playoff appearance in his rookie year, and of course we've already spoken about Charlotte in this episode about how good of a story they've been. So they have nothing to lose there. Boston's been very up and down, and actually I'm saying about Gordon Hayward, but Kemba Walker as well will be hoping to get one up on his former team. But I don't really know. I think that's an interesting matchup, and that's going to be a testament to how these playing games are. It's really who shows up on the day. You don't have a 7-game series to decide who's the best team. It's someone can just go off for a night, and I really do see Charlotte potentially pulling something like that off. But of course, in the 9th and 10th seed, we have Washington and Indiana at the moment, and we've already talked about how Chicago could potentially mathematically still get that 10th seed, but regardless, I think Washington has that winner of the 9-10 almost taken. It's Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal have looked electric since the All-Star break, and the both of them have really excelled both together and gotten this team up and running. And it's crazy, like there's been jokes on NBA Twitter, of course, that like Daniel Gafford was the best trade of the trade deadline, but when you do look at it, with Thomas Bryant being out for the year, the Wizards really haven't had a solid center there. They have Mo Wagner there for a few games. They've had Robin Lopez in and out. They, of course, have Alex Len. But Daniel Gafford has really been solid there, and I think he might have found a home there. Of course, when he was at Chicago, he had Wendell Carter to compete with, Luke Cornett when he did get his minutes, Laurie Markkinen when they slot him over to the 5. So there was, I suppose, an awful lot of players to soak up just a few amount of minutes in Chicago. So I think he's after finding his home here, or at least found his home until Thomas Bryant comes back, and maybe see how that figures itself out. But I think Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal will have that game wrapped up, and I actually would imagine that you could be looking at Washington and Charlotte, or Washington and Boston, playing for that 8th seed. And again, it's all really who shows up on the day. And I know Russell Westbrook doesn't have a great track record when it comes to must-win games, but he does have it in him. And if he defers at the right moments to players like Bradley Beal, they might be in with a chance of making the playoffs. And of course, similar to the West, we have Philadelphia taking on the 8th seed. 8th seed being the winner in the play-ins, and Brooklyn taking on the 7th seed. And truly, that's a horrific matchup for both sides that come out of play-in games, because to go up against the Philly side with MVP candidate Joel Embiid and, of course, the three-headed monster in Brooklyn, it's going to be easy pickings, or at least them teams will be thinking it'll be easy pickings going into them opening rounds. Then the 3-6, we have Milwaukee and Miami, and I don't think Milwaukee will be happy with that matchup at the moment, but kind of where they stand and where Brooklyn stand, Brooklyn really only have to notch another few wins to solidify that 2nd seed. So this matchup is, I wouldn't say locked, because Atlanta and New York are only a few games ahead of Miami, and actually, while I say that, the Hawks and the Heat are tied for a record. So I think this will be a problem matchup for Milwaukee. Of course, we've seen in the last couple of years how the Heat can cause problems for Giannis, and that's particularly coming down to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. They just seem to have Giannis's number, and it's going to be a big question whether he can bring it in the postseason as well. Of course, we've seen him kind of choke up, or seen it really expose his lack of moves. It's really, if you build a wall in the paint, he's struggling. He's going to a mid-range, he's going to a post spin, he's going to, even they're letting, I suppose, live or die by the tree when the ball is in Giannis's hands. And if he's going to score, they're probably going to let him score, because realistically, what other options you have? So I think that'll be a problem matchup for Milwaukee. I'd fancy Miami in that. And then at the moment, the 4-5 is New York and Atlanta, who realistically, did anybody see the Knicks and the Hawks in a 4-5 at the start of the season? I think you would have gotten good money on that. Trae Young, he's had another great year. Statistically, it's been a weird one for him. Of course, at the start of the season, we were seeing these massive 35-15 games almost night in, night out, and he was getting to the free throw line at ease. But I feel like since Steve Nash made that comment that that's not basketball, and of course, for those of you who don't know, Steve Nash was Trae Young's idol growing up, and I suppose to hear that from your idol, that the way you play basketball isn't really basketball, it would hurt on a different level. And I know the attempts, the amount he's got to the line has been pretty consistent for the most part, but I think you've seen a different approach from Trae Young. He's been an awful lot quieter on the court, but a lot more constructive, I feel. And although you've seen a statistical drop off since Nate McMillan has came in. You've seen his assists kind of stay in double digits, his points drop a little bit, but he's bringing his teammates into the game a lot more. You've seen John Collins statistically improve since Nate McMillan's come in, Gallinari, Tony Snell, Clint Capella. Actually, I think Trae Young was on that list of top 5 partnerships. So in terms of point guards or players linking to assist the points. I know I'm after butchering whatever way that was wrote, but he featured on it twice with John Collins and Clint Capella. And of course, like pick and roll, pick and pop, John Collins is going to catch on the alley-oop, the same with Clint Capella. And he has played smarter basketball. You've really seen the basketball IQ come out in him, kind of really becoming that floor general that you want to see in a pass first point guard, which is good. You're seeing the different side of Trae Young than we've seen in the last 2 years, and that's not even speaking to how well Nate McMillan has coached this team since he came in. He's really turned them around and cashed in on their value. Like they had a good off season bringing in the likes of Bojan Bogdanovic and Danilo Gallinari and stuff. So they've really had a good season, and playoff berth in Trae Young's third year is pretty good, and same with John Collins getting the first playoff berth. So who knows? It's gonna be a really exciting playoffs this year. I'm really excited, and an awful lot of these matchups really they're setting the bar high. It's high expectations going into this postseason, without a doubt. So guys, that's me for today. Of course, like I said, today was a short episode, but I'm glad to be back. I'm really excited what the next few weeks and the next few months hold for this podcast. And I'm honestly, I've said it before when I recorded earlier episodes. I'm so grateful for anyone that listens to this, and I'm really grateful for all the support and feedback that I get. I really enjoy this. I've wanted to do podcasts and sports writing for the longest time. It's always been something that I've aspired to do. I would have put it in the same category for me as, like, let's say wanting to be a footballer when I grew up. That's something that you can only really dream of. You need to be in the right place at the right time, but it's only really after growing up that I've realized anyone can do this to a point. Not that anyone can do it, but like anyone can try to it. And that's not necessarily to say that I'm the best at doing this or that these podcasts are a work of art, but I enjoy doing it. I enjoy sharing my thoughts, and especially on basketball, there's so much debate to be had and a lot of important and fun discussions to have amongst the community. And it's good that I can just kind of plug in the mic, put on the headphones, and just talk openly about my opinions and talk about what's going on around the league. And like I said, I'm really grateful for the support that's shown. I'm really, really excited for what's to come with this podcast. So, of course, just to wrap up this, we should have another episode tomorrow evening, Tuesday the 11th. That will be the Eastern Conference recap of season so far. Then on Friday, we'll be looking at a Western Conference recap similar to the East. Then on Monday, day after the regular season ends, I'll be going through my award selections for MVP, Rookie of the Year, so on and so forth. And then the Tuesday, next day after that, I'll be going through my predictions for the play-in. So of course, that'll be the day the play-in start, and we'll have a concrete picture of what their matchups will be and what the potential storylines around that will be as well. So, of course, wherever you're listening to this, subscribe, follow, rate 5 out of 5, do whatever you need to do. You'll find this on YouTube as well at YouTube channel Carl of Clubs, both Carl and Clubs with a K. And yeah, any support, any feedback, anything you want to let me know, message me if you know me. If you don't, find me on Twitter, Carl Brannigan. And yeah, hope you enjoy.